In the winter of 2018, the city of Boston was freezing. To keep homes warm and the lights on, energy companies desperately needed more natural gas. To solve this problem, a massive tanker ship arrived in Boston Harbor. It was carrying liquefied natural gas, or LNG. But the important thing to notice here is that this ship had not come from Texas or Louisiana. It had not come from any part of the United States. It had traveled thousands of miles from a gas field in Russia. At that exact moment, the United States was the #1 producer of natural gas in the world. The state of Texas was producing so much gas that they were literally running out of places to put it. Logistically, moving gas from Texas to Boston should be simple. It is shorter, faster, and safer than crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Yet, during a crisis, the U.S. was forced to buy energy from a political rival. So, why did this happen? It was not because of a lack of pipelines or because of shortage of fuel. It was because of a shipping problem. Under United States law, it is illegal for a foreign ship to move goods from one American port to another. If a company wants to move gas from Texas to Boston by water, they must use an American ship. But here's the catch. The United States does not currently operate any LNG carriers registered under the U.S. flag. Not a single one. Because the law banned foreign ships and because no American ships existed, the supply chain simply broke. It became impossible to move American fuel to an American city. This is the reality of the Jones Act, a law that was meant to protect American shipping, but instead has made it disappear. To understand why this law exists, we must look at the world as it was in 1920. World War I had just ended. During the war, the U.S. learned a hard lesson about logistics. When the fighting started, the U.S. military struggled to move troops and supplies to Europe because they did not have enough merchant ships. They had to rely on British and French ships, which was a major strategic weakness. A senator named Wesley Jones from Washington State wanted to fix this. He proposed a law, the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. Senator Jones wanted to make sure that the United States would always have a massive fleet of its own ships. He believed that if the government protected the shipping industry from foreign competition, American shipyards would boom. They would build thousands of ships and employ thousands of workers. So the law set up 4 strict rules for any ship to transport goods between 2 U.S. points, like from Florida to New York or California to Hawaii. It must meet these 4 criteria: owned by Americans, crewed by Americans, flying the American flag, and most importantly, built in the United States. The first 3 rules are common. Many countries, like Japan and Canada, have laws that protect their local sailors. But the 4th rule, requiring the ship to be built in the U.S., is unique. And it is this 4th rule that destroyed the economics of the industry. In the 1970s and 80s, countries like South Korea, Japan, and later China poured money into their shipbuilding industries. They built massive semi-automated factories. They used standardized designs to build ships faster and cheaper. As a result, the price of building a ship in Asia dropped significantly. However, American shipyards did not have to compete with these Asian factories. Because of the Jones Act, American shipping companies were forced to buy American ships, no matter the price. Without competition, American shipyards did not felt the need to innovate. They did not invest in automation. They kept building ships the old-fashioned way, often by hand, one by one. And because of that, in the time a U.S. company built one medium-sized container ship, a Korean company had already delivered 20, as they can work on many ships at a time. Now let's talk about the price difference. An Aloha-class 3,600 20-foot equivalent unit container ship built in Philadelphia costs about $334.5 million. In contrast, an ultra-large container vessel at 24,000 TEU is priced at $272 million if built in South Korea. That is, a ship over 6 times the carrying capacity is $61.5 million cheaper if built in South Korea. Certain ships, such as LNG carriers, were last launched from U.S. shipyards in 1980, whereas they are the preferred order of choice for builders in South Korea. In 1960, the U.S. had nearly 3,000 ships in its merchant fleet. Today, in a country of 330 million people, there are fewer than 100 large ocean-going ships eligible to move goods between U.S. ports. The industry that the law was supposed to save has shrunk by 97%. When new ships cost too much money, companies stop buying them. Instead, they keep their old ships running. In the international shipping market, a commercial ship is usually retired and scrapped after 15 or 20 years. The ocean is a harsh environment. Salt water corrodes metal, and engines wear out. But in the United States, ships are kept in service for 30, 40, or even 50 years. They are patched up and repaired over and over again because building a replacement is simply too expensive. This has created what experts call a zombie fleet. This is not just an economic problem, it's a safety problem. In 2015, a cargo ship called El Faro left Jacksonville, Florida, bound for Puerto Rico. The ship was 40 years old. In any other modern nation, a ship of that age would likely have been scrapped years ago. While at sea, El Faro sailed into the path of a hurricane. The ship lost engine power immediately. Because it was old and outdated, it took on water and sank. All 33 crew members on board lost their lives. Investigators later noted that the age of the vessel played a major role. The Jones Act incentivizes companies to push machinery past its limit. By making new, modern, safe ships unaffordable, the law indirectly keeps sailors on older, more dangerous vessels. In the global shipping industry, the trend is toward megaships. These vessels are massive floating cities carrying 20,000 containers at a time. Because they are so large, they can only dock at a few massive deep water ports, like Los Angeles, New York, or Savannah. In the rest of the world, once a megaship unloads at a major hub, the cargo is transferred onto smaller feeder vessels. These smaller ships then shuttle the goods up and down the coast to secondary ports, like Portland, Baltimore, or Charleston. Just like a commuter flight connects to a major international airport. But in the United States, this secondary leg is broken. Because the trip from the hub port, like Los Angeles, to the feeder port, like Oakland, is between two U.S. points. It requires a Jones ship. But since American feeder ships are virtually non-existent or prohibitively expensive, this water route is abandoned. Instead, when goods arrive at a major port, they must be unloaded and immediately put onto trucks or trains to reach nearby cities. This creates a hidden overland premium. A consumer living in a secondary port city should be able to get cheap goods delivered directly to their waterfront. Instead, they pay the higher price of long-haul trucking from a major hub hundreds of miles away. The port infrastructure in these smaller cities sits underutilized, while the highways connecting them to the major hubs are gridlocked. While mainland consumers pay this cost in the form of higher trucking fees, Americans living in non-contiguous territories, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Alaska, pay it in the price of basic survival. For these regions, there is no trucking option. Because these islands are U.S. soil, any ship arriving from the U.S. mainland must be American-built, owned, and crewed. This creates a captive market, where shipping rates are completely detached from global reality. Shipping a standard container from Los Angeles to Honolulu, a distance of about 2,500 miles, can cost twice as much as shipping that same container from Los Angeles to Shanghai, China, which is 6,000 miles away. Because the ship carrying the cargo from LA itself is 4 times costlier than the ship coming from China. This problem is now threatening the industries of the future. The United States is currently trying to build massive offshore wind farms to generate clean electricity. Installing a giant wind turbine in the ocean requires a specialized ship called a wind turbine installation vessel. These are complex, high-tech ships. There are dozens of them in Europe, but there are none in the United States. And because of the Jones Act, American energy companies cannot simply hire a European ship to do the job if that ship has to transport parts from a U.S. port to the wind farm site. This has caused massive delays and budget overruns for wind projects. American companies are currently trying to build the first American-made installation vessel, but it is costing roughly $500 million, significantly more than the global price. Once again, the law that is supposed to help American industry is actually slowing it down. For over 100 years, the Jones Act has remained the law of the land. It survives because of political support from shipyard unions and domestic shipping companies who benefit from the lack of competition. They argue that without the law, the U.S. maritime industry would disappear entirely, leaving the country vulnerable in a war. However, the data suggests the industry has already disappeared. The fleet has shrunk to a fraction of its former size. The ships are old, the shipyards are slow. The Jones Act is a lesson in the unintended consequences of economics. It shows how a law designed to protect a local industry can end up suffocating it.